Hi, Mia.
Hi, Angel.
Oh, oh dear, you cut out entirely there for a second, but I
Oh
think you're
no,
back now.
I'm here.
Um, so my understanding is that you've recently played through the first few chapters of Beyond Two Souls, the Quantic Dream game by David Cage.
You understand very correctly.
Oh, that's an incredible coincidence, because so did I.
Wonders never cease.
Yes. So Mia and I are preparing uh, some content that's going to cover an upcoming hiatus that she has going, and she had this great idea. What if we both played a narrative game that neither of us has ever played, and maybe we'll have a chance to check in every once in a while to compare notes on how things are going in our stories and what we think so far. And the choice made was for Beyond Two Souls, and I've never played it. I've played some of David Cage's other games. Mia, what games have you played by David Cage?
I have played in this order. I played Heavy Rain, and then I played Fahrenheit Indigo Prophecy. I have not yet played Detroit Become Human.
And I'm just going to take one quick look at something because the timer on my recording is not moving at all, but it does appear to be recording. Just give me 1 second. Sorry if you're watching this because we're recording this live. It does look like it's going, so we're going to call that a success. Sorry about the delay.
Yeah, I had noticed that earlier when I was recording myself, that it was just staying at 1 second, but it recorded the whole thing.
Wild. Okay.
I know.
Yeah, because we've done recordings in the past. In any event, just before we jump in, I wanted to touch base on something that I talked about at the very top of episode 1. Beyond Two Souls features some pretty big name actors, and one of them is Elliot Page from the Umbrella Academy and some other projects. And in this game, Elliot is playing a young woman named Jody, and that may make the conversation around some of the names and pronouns somewhat more sophisticated than it is in some projects. So I just wanted to say for the record that I would like to be extremely careful for myself about any sort of misgendering or even more so dead naming. And to the
Right.
extent that I ever misspeak, rest assured that it is an accident, and I will endeavor to catch it, correct it, and then move on so we can just continue talking.
Exactly. Exactly that. I had also made mention of that at the beginning of my playthrough, and similarly, if a mistake is made, it is not at all intentional. So yeah.
So you've played, wow, it is thundering outside all of a sudden. You've
amazing.
played both Indigo Prophecy and Heavy Rain a lot more recently than I have. What are your thoughts? Oh, we should also say we played up through the end of, people who are watching this in our collection will know this,
Right.
but we played up through the end of My Imaginary Friend, which is one of the chapters, and we're both playing in the original order mode, not the remixed chronological order mode.
Oh gosh, that's what the remix is? Oh yeah, no. I don't think I would enjoy that as much.
Right, it would be ruinous, wouldn't it? Like, the
Right.
fact that it's even an option.
Right. That uh, okay. So that has just blown my mind. But anyway, yes, original order.
I have to assume, and it's very much an assumption, much like you, I really don't know very much about this game outside of what we both have played.
Right.
And of course, like, little snippets that you hear about how people felt about it. But I have to assume that the chronological order was put in because people found it complicated to piece together what the story was. But at the same time, like, would you recommend that somebody watch a cut of Memento that was cut
Oh
to
my
chronological order?
God, no. Can you imagine? Wow. Right. No.
So, from what you've seen so far, how do you think that it compares in these early chapters to your recent memories of Heavy Rain and Indigo Prophecy?
Well, interestingly, I played Heavy Rain. One of the biggest issues was I had played Heavy Rain with mouse and keyboard, and that was disastrous. Just all of the QuickTime events were absolute fails. And I had switched over to the controller for Fahrenheit, I believe. Right, Angel, did I use a controller for Fahrenheit? I wasn't.
I That's a good question. I don't
Yeah,
remember. I know it was keyboard and mouse for Heavy Rain, but
right.
Fahrenheit,
I
I
let's
don't
just
remember.
yeah, I don't either. I would have to assume, since I had played that, I believe within the year, the past year, that I had used a controller. But the gameplay with Heavy Rain being the later game, it was a huge step up from Fahrenheit. Although the interaction, because I was using controller with Fahrenheit, it was still difficult for me. But it is more instinctive, I think, with the controller than with mouse and keyboard. That being said, though, I am surprised that that interface hadn't improved more. Um, so when did Heavy Rain come out?
Oh gosh, in terms of a year, I
Okay.
don't know. It was a PlayStation 3 game, so
Okay.
that era. So sometime I would guess it came out sort of. Sorry, I'm going to sound like a fool. I'm going to say that it would have come out sometime in like 2008, 2009, and that is very much a super rough guess.
Sure, and I've got it actually. I just pulled it up in front of me, so it's 2010, and
Okay.
so that makes a little bit more sense to me because Heavy Rain was released in 2010, and Beyond Two Souls was initially released in 2013, and I thought that the time between the two games was much greater. I think I was confusing the release dates of this and Detroit Become Human, but regardless the controller mechanics, I would love to talk to you about that. We don't necessarily need to talk, in great depth about that on this stream, but I still struggled.
Oh, I struggled a great deal as
You
well.
did? Okay.
Yeah. I will say this. People who have watched my videos on this have probably found them very yelly
Oh my
because
god, shut up.
oh yeah, there's it feels like you have split second opportunities to respond to things,
Yes.
and rather than the very clear button prompts and directional prompts that you see in Heavy Rain and I'll just let you know, Detroit Become Human, like
Okay.
there's such a through line of controls between Heavy Rain and Detroit that to now play for me the game that came between the two
Right.
and to find that it adopts it's a very different presentation because as you've seen, Beyond Two Souls just doesn't put button prompts on the screen. It puts dots that it
Yes.
expects you to understand what direction to push.
Yes.
And there was one sequence in particular where Jodie was practicing fighting at the CIA, where I thought that my ending was going to be getting thrown out of the academy.
Right.
I could not fight that man, and the game kept telling me, "Oh, just push in the directions that her hands are moving."
Mm-hmm.
There's one specific point where her hands are very clearly moving down,
Right.
and you're supposed to push right.
Right. I cannot express to you how happy I am to hear this because yours and my playthroughs then are going to have similar yelliness because I can't count the number of times I go what in this, how am I supposed to know which direction that is. The combat sequence in the academy for me was not as bad as the train sequence. That combat sequence, it was an absolute guess as to which direction she was supposed to be moving her force, or whatever my words are.
Yeah, one thing that I didn't do, and maybe it's because of the urgency of the situation, but I never allowed it. I never had a combat input timeout, so maybe you are afforded more time to discern what you're supposed to do than I think you are, because I kept trying to do it immediately,
Right.
and there were also times when I just felt like instinctively she'd want to dodge when instead she would go to meet the incoming blow.
Right.
But yeah, the same thing with the train sequence. I was relieved that by the train sequence, I felt like I was starting to get it, but there was a like. So I don't know how much these diverge. Did
Right.
you have a moment on the train when you were afforded the chance to like smash out a window and try to climb out?
Yes.
Okay, I failed the climbing out, and
Yes.
I to this moment don't know why.
Right. Exactly. I don't either. I got pulled back in by one of the officers.
Okay,
Yeah.
maybe that's just what happens there. Like that's possible.
Maybe.
It seemed to act like I hadn't like wiggled the stick enough, and I'm like,
Right.
it was another yelly moment. Like, what did I do wrong? What is happening?
I know. And in particular, there were just throughout, you summed it up already, but the issue for me was, all right, in this instance, am I supposed to hold the bumper? Am I supposed to push the sticks apart, push them down, push them up, push them together? And there were times when it was press A to look at something, and I would press A and I'd look at the thing and then bounce back out. So I'd hold A and then I'd look at the thing and just continue looking at the thing and try to press other buttons, and nothing was happening. And so then I let go of A and bounced back out again. And I found out it was one scene in particular. I think it was the last one, the My Imaginary Friend. There were two areas where, I failed to get a cookie and I failed to pull the shoebox down. Did you have either of those?
Well, I chose not to get a cookie. Jody asks for a cookie,
Yeah.
and then her mom says no, and then I abandoned the plot to get a cookie. And I figured that
Oh.
I don't know. I assume it sounds like you took a different track. That maybe you can try to coerce Aiden into so that's another thing very
Okay.
quickly. Aiden or Aiden?
I
Because
know.
the characters in the game seem a little bit.
Yes. Jody herself, one of the final scenes in the group that we just did says Aiden and then says Aiden. Within like a minute. But let's go with Aiden. I feel like
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, I chose at that time not to go for the cookie. So when I got the end of chapter stat that said you didn't get a cookie, it was like, yeah, that's correct. And the shoebox,
Yeah.
I never saw a shoebox.
Okay.
When I hit that very last end of chapter thing, I was like, what shoebox? I didn't know what it was talking about.
Well, and I'm hoping I know what it was. Like there was a decoupage shoebox on top of a wardrobe in, I think, the parents' bedroom upstairs, across from the dad's office.
Oh, okay.
And I think in both of those cases, now that you're telling me that you actively didn't, at least with the cookie, you didn't go back to try for the cookie, I didn't either. And so what I assumed in that final screen, I think I assumed incorrectly that when I saw the cookie, Mom said no, I should have been able to grab it but couldn't. But it might have just been that I did not go back to try to get a cookie. I don't know if that makes right. That, you know what? Yes, Angel. In both of those instances, the things were very high up. I suspect we were supposed to have tried to go to use Aiden.
Yeah, and I
Okay.
didn't want to. Like, I figure at that point in her journey,
Yep.
Jody is sort of creeped out by Aiden, doesn't want to interact with it very much. For something as menial as getting a cookie,
Right.
or to like, I again never saw the shoebox. I just figured that she was gonna mostly be interested in not, like, she said multiple times, like at one point she picks up the phone. Did you do this? She picks up the phone, she's
Yes.
like pretending that she's talking to somebody.
Yes.
And like then Aiden makes like creepy noises, and she's just like, come on, Aiden, stop
Right.
it.
Right.
Like she wants to be left alone, and for her to simultaneously be calling on Aiden for things that she wants felt wrong.
Right.
So I was just like, she's not gonna be like this. She's not gonna be talking to Aiden and trying to get help.
Right. Right.
Now, I'm curious what you made of Dad, because the scene that introduced the existence of Dad occurred immediately after I said, "Oh, I guess Dad's not in the picture," because there was like no mention, and then, oh wait, here he is. Hi, Father.
That was I also suspected it was a single parent household. Then I go upstairs and I'm looking around, and I happen to catch out of the corner of my eye that Dad was sitting at his desk. So I go in and he's huffy, and I'm like, ugh, okay, I guess, you know, he just doesn't appreciate that he's got a little daughter who wants his attention. And then when we go out into the yard to play, I'm assuming you had to go out into the yard, right, in order to progress? Okay. Yeah. I was spitting vinegar. I was spitting vinegar and seeing red. I loathe him. I hate him so much. That is what I feel about Dad. I am not a fan.
Yeah, no, he's awful. And like that brings us to like what we're sort of starting at the end first, which is fine, because it's sort of like the most recent thing that both of us have seen. There was when Jody is trying to go to sleep, you do have an opportunity to like interact as Aiden, and it, as with several other moments, it's not clear to the player what surfaces Aiden can and cannot move through.
Thank you.
And that was a section where it's like, one of the first things that I guess I looked around Jody's room a little bit, and then it was like, okay, now I'll leave, and I went to go through the door and it blocks you off.
Right.
So it's like, oh, I guess I can't leave the room. And then it turns out you can by going down through the floor. Did you do that?
I don't. We're talking about in her bedroom, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
When she's trying to go to sleep and, you know, is sort of like tossing and turning a little bit.
Right.
And then as Aiden, yeah, you can go down through the floor. It's like, okay, this goes to the same thing like with the fighting controls, where I feel like there was an attempt followed by a belief that they had succeeded in making the controls much more intuitive, and that people would just sort of like get what they can and can't do.
But no.
And I don't feel like their confidence was justified, because like the straight up button prompts in both Heavy Rain and Detroit Become Human are simply easier to read. And the fact that they went back to the Heavy Rain style after this game shows that I think that they got a lot of popular feedback that says the same.
That makes sense. And I actually, interestingly, said something akin to, you know, maybe this is intuitive for other people, and I'm, you know, it's just simply not intuitive for my brain. But this all seems so opaque, and just inconsistent. Yeah.
And also the third person camera, when you are walking around an environment, it's sometimes so rigid that it feels like you can barely pan around, and like the game is like almost ashamed of you for trying. Like, how dare you mess up the blocking of this scene?
Right.
It's like, I want to look around, and it is, again, to my memory, the only Quantic Dream game that operates that way. This game feels like it was made with a very different creative hand than any of their other projects.
And I'm really glad that you've said that, because I was struggling with it just from the very first scene where I'm walking around the hospital with her, and I'm confused as to I thought I was uncomfortable, and I couldn't really formulate in my head what exactly it was that I was uncomfortable with, but it was something about feeling like this was first person movement from a third person perspective. And I was definitely struggling with that.
Now, in that early hospital scene, how did you react to, like, they bring Jody in to do some experiments, and she goes to read, like they ask her to read the card in the next room.
Yeah.
One of my first questions is, did you answer honestly?
Oh my God, it never occurred to me not to answer honestly.
I did the first one accurately, and then in the second one I deliberately chose the wrong one. And
Oh
after
my
after
God.
choosing the wrong one twice, they were like, well, I guess Aiden just isn't gonna cooperate with us this time, so let's try something different. And that was awesome that I could see what it was. I was
Wow.
deliberately choosing something else, and they seemed to that the story accounted for that, and they moved on to something else, and that there was some like resignation, but also not like they weren't frustrated.
Right.
They know what's up with Jody. They don't know how it works, but they know what she can do. So the
Right.
fact that she wasn't playing along, they were like, "Oh, I guess it must be Aiden then." It's like, yeah, okay, they've got me figured out.
Wow. Now, okay, so how far did you take it in the room with the woman? Did you?
I
Yeah.
tried to dial it back early. Like I'm thinking to myself, I don't yet know how I feel about the doctors and the medical staff that are performing these experiments, because this is very early on.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do know is that the woman in the next room appears to be some rando that they're paying $25 to come in off the street.
Yep.
We'll give you coffee and $25, and all you got to do is sit in this room. I don't want to be cruel to her. I don't think that Jody would either. And so when things start getting out of control, I hesitated. I drew back as far as I could from doing anything scary to and around her, but I couldn't find a way to like
Oh.
end the scene right away. So how did you handle it?
Oh, I went crazy. I exploded everything that I could, and I wound up strangling her. And actually,
really?
oh, I did. Yep. And that percentage of sociopaths who strangled the woman was like 25%. So I was in the vast minority there. But it was. I was playing around, what can I do? And quite honestly, I felt horrible about it afterward, because Jody wouldn't have wanted that. And ever, I played in that first scene. I occupied the dudes in the office. I occupied Cole, and then the other technician, and then after that point, I played her as a good little girl who was not the sociopath that I am.
Interesting. Yeah, so I wound up smashing a lot of things,
Yeah.
but didn't interact with any of the people, and
Oh.
I did eventually figure out that if I could go back to Jody and just stop it. Like,
Right.
if you return to Jody, you can end the rampage. And I felt bad about not having done it sooner, because the
Yeah.
woman in the next room was thoroughly spooked. And again, she had done nothing to me or to
Yeah.
anybody.
Yep. Now so along those lines, what were your thoughts on that party when she was a teenager, young teenager, like middle school, that looked like to me?
David Cage has only read about bullying in like 80s high school movies.
Yes.
Like,
Oh my God, Angel. Yes. Yes.
it was very funny to me, because it goes from like
Yes.
0 to
Yes!
carry so quickly.
I know! That is almost exactly what I said. I was just, we went from 0 to 1,000 in the span of a heartbeat for no reason. I mean, you knew as soon as the daughter, the birthday girl, opened the door, I think I said, all right, here we go. I know how this is going to go. I've seen this scene a million times.
Oh, really? I was kind of like,
Oh.
when she opened the door and the person also, I learned nobody's name. To me, they were Party Girl, Glasses,
Right.
Evans, which is the name I randomly assigned the British guy, and there was like Guy with Joint. Like, I didn't. If they had names, I didn't pick up on any of them. But when Party Girl opens up the door And she was like, "Oh, hey, Jody." Like, I was like, "Oh, do they know each other?" Like, if I was expecting more of a like, "Oh, well, we're all in there," like that she would be much more cold, and instead, like, she was welcoming enough that it was like, "Oh, maybe this isn't gonna be so bad," and then it just goes as bad as it could go.
Yeah. For me, it was just there was some of that enthusiasm, so it was slightly muddled, but there was enough of the other. There was enough disdain. There was enough of, oh, you got me a present, cool, and just grabbed it and walked inside. Like, for me, there was enough there to mistrust. Did you dance?
I did so much dancing.
Okay, yay! All right. Now, I mean, I had an issue with the fact that, of course, she had to do swaying hips things because all women and girls are taught that they need to. Anyway, I assume you did not drink any beer.
Yes, correct.
Okay. I did. And I think I did that in part because I was it was in part for Jody because I felt like she's very uncomfortable. This is not about her being a follower. It's about maybe her just trying to relax. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure what that was, but it was also in part, I know that Angel isn't going to choose the beer option, so I would like to see what that will look like, and then I will have the opportunity to see the non-drinking option in his playthrough. But did you then kiss Matt?
Very quickly before we get there, did you smoke the joint?
I didn't get offered a joint.
Oh, I was offered. I didn't realize what it like. It's not that I don't know what a joint is. It's that I didn't see it on the screen.
Oh.
So like he was like, "Oh, hey, you want one or you want some or something like that?" And I thought he was like pointing to like some food that was there on the plate. So it's like, "Sure."
Oh,
and then so she takes a drag off the joint and
oh no,
has a good time that way. Now so I guess Matt was the name of Evans?
Yes, Matt Evans.
Okay, so Matt, so first of all, I don't want to break down every single decision, but I was very curious. What music did you select? Because Party Girl says that you can, Jody gets to select the music. So I'm curious which one you went to and what happened.
I was told to select the music, and so I explored the house. I'll pick the fucking
really?
Yes. Well, not the whole house. Just like I was exploring the living room as much as I could. I tried to actually leave the party. They, of course, would not allow me. And by the time I had almost gotten my fill of the living room, Glasses, I think. Yeah, it was for sure. Glasses was like, I thought you were supposed to get the music. And then she put it on herself. So I did not have an opportunity to choose.
Okay, I have an internal theory that no matter what you choose, Glasses like chides you and changes it to something else to sort of like set up proto-bullying. Because I went with rock music, thinking that like this crew would be too cool for pop, and then she like scolded me and set it over to pop music.
Okay.
So I sort of think that, but that's a guess, and that's why I was
Sure.
curious what you'd chosen. But yeah, bringing us back to Matt. So as soon as he stepped up to Jody, I was like, "Oh, Jody, this is Billy Zabka. Like, you need to not interact with this kid." And then he had some line, and I referenced this in my playthrough. He said something about like, "I don't want." He said something that seemed to express concern for how she was feeling and whether or not she was comfortable.
Right.
And that started to like bring my guard down.
Mm-hmm.
But then when they were dancing, he has this line like, "Oh, I've never met a girl like you."
Yeah.
Like, bitch, you've known her for 15 seconds. You've exchanged like 3 minutes worth of dialogue with her that you've never known anyone as deep as she is. And then he goes to like grab her ass, and that was an absolute non-starter. And then when it was like, do you want to kiss him? That was one of the very few decisions in any narrative game ever where it just timed out before I could process whether or not what I want versus what Jody
Yes.
wants, right? So the
Yes.
kiss went forward.
Yes, absolutely identical scenario happened for me. I was sitting there going, oh, I don't, and then all of a sudden the kiss choice got bigger and they're leading it, and I'm like, shit.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then, like, I will also say that not often having been a teenage girl at a teenage girl party, even I was keyed in on the fact that Dr. Willem Dafoe gave her like an original
Right.
Edgar Allan Poe.
Right.
Like, yo, this. Now, I will ask you, what percentage of your birthdays have you been presented with a thong by one of your friends? Is that a common gift that is just sort of like handed out at teenage parties?
Not at the time that I was a teenager, and not with my particular group of friends. No thongs existed. I remember having like dinosaur stuffed animal animatronic things. So
Right.
yeah.
That seemed again like whoever's writing this is coming at it with this image that actual and again, like you said, what was this, 2013?
Yeah.
So it's not even like TikTok was a thing yet. It's like, okay, this doesn't seem like any of the high school students I've ever interacted with, but
Yep.
shit, maybe I don't know. So but like even then, like this first edition Poe to
Yeah.
some, like, how old is she supposed to be? Like 13, 14, 15? I know that Jody seems younger than the other kids,
Yep.
but she's just at best gonna be like, oh cool, a book, and she's just gonna like set it aside because
Right.
that's not what she's into.
Right. I know. And that's the one thing, like, even before Dr. Willem Dafoe, you know, he's dropping her off, and even before she gets out of the car, I'm saying, could you give her something more concrete than, oh, of course they're gonna like you, it'll all be fine? Could you actually give her something that would be helpful, something specific, something that's unique about her, that she can walk into that place feeling like she actually does have something to offer, not just an empty platitude that it's all going to be fine. So he's just daddy clueless, from not knowing how to be actually supportive of her, even though he appears at this moment to have good intentions, to giving her a first edition Poe.
Right. And I'll also say that as soon as I saw that there was like a cabinet under the stairs, I think
Oh,
I
shut
might
up.
have made like a Harry Potter reference.
Yes.
And then I'll also say that of the bullying, the line that like touched me off the most was when Matt says like, oh, she's been chasing me around all night. It's
I
like,
know.
again, guys, this party is 20 minutes old.
Right. Right.
So fast.
Right.
And like, again, because he'd started to win me over with there's some like golly gee aw shucks thing that he does, and it's for me it's been several days since I've played it.
Sure.
But it seemed like he was concerned about how she was feeling and her comfort level, which then shortly thereafter you come to recognize, or I came to recognize, like, oh, this is just part of his manipulation technique.
Yep.
And then for the fact that he turns on her, as they all do, for like just no reason. She hasn't
Right.
made any grand faux pas. She brought like a present that isn't as cool. You could just like set it aside.
Right.
But like they take this as an opportunity to just like dump on her. Did you show off her powers to the group? Like when they ask like, oh, what can you do? Show us this special trick you can do.
I was firmly in her head. I was leaving Mia out of it. And I did not. I was thinking, you know, I had her act reserved toward Matt Evans initially, and then after a couple of questions, I think it was the moment where he said something about, oh, I shouldn't have asked you that, I'm so sorry, you know, blah blah blah.
That might have been the thing I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yep. And so she relaxes some, but then when it came time to be a party trick, I thought, no way is she relaxed enough for this. And she's not really I don't see her as being super thrilled about this power that she has. So no, I didn't show her off. And yeah, how about you?
No, ditto. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're not. The way to make friends is not to establish yourself as being special and different. And as you just said, being the entertainment.
right.
Look. I can dance like a monkey. Like that's not going
Yes.
to make friends and help you connect with people. It's only going to set you apart. And so, yeah, same all the way through. And then when the bullying gets real bad and they throw her in,
Yeah.
I I'm I'm taking the fact that she didn't immediately blow open the door with Aiden's help, that maybe if she gets very panicked or very emotional, she can't communicate or like loses that bond, and she had to like
Hmm.
calm down a little bit. That's my best guess. But then when I got out, it offered like, do you want to take revenge? And
Right.
I'm curious what choice you made there.
I didn't, because I didn't think that's that. I don't think she's super stoked about her powers, and they were obnoxious. But taking revenge just seemed so cartoonish. Like for me,
Yeah, and
yeah,
same here.
yeah,
And like my feeling is that they're losers.
right,
Like the thing is, Jody is capable of something extraordinary. They She was hoping to connect with other kids that were around her same age.
yeah,
These kids, for no reason that we can possibly discern, decided to make her a punching bag and to try to torture her and lock her up under the stairs.
right,
And it's like, in a day, another thing here is maybe this is where it would be very interesting to see the perspective of somebody who's only ever played the chronological order, but we see how things turn out for Jody.
right,
We see her as an active CIA agent. Like, we know that she gets past this. It's the lesson that
right,
kids are told when they're bullied, like it gets better.
right.
Jody, we've already seen a point where it's better for her. So these teenagers seem so, as much as it would hurt for her in the moment, we've seen enough to know that this feels really inconsequential.
Yeah, fair point. That had not occurred to me, but yeah, I think I think at the time it was not at all inconsequential for her. But she
Not at
doesn't
all.
see, yeah, she regardless of any of that, just doesn't seem like the I'm gonna get revenge on you kind type.
Agreed. Yeah, I feel like Jody struggles. There was a line early on, and I'm trying to remember exactly which chapter it was, but Jody says, I think it's to Willem Dafoe. I'm trying to remember. She's describing Aiden as something that is bound to her,
Yep.
and this is a lion in a cage.
Yes.
That's how she characterizes it.
Yep.
And if that was before the party scene, if that's the relationship that Jody has with this entity, that it's something that she may sometimes feel tolerates her presence, that they're locked together, they can't be away from each other, and the more adversarial that becomes, the more dangerous it could be for both of them. So to cater to the darker impulses, I feel like she will have needed to establish a very strong sense of self-control
Right.
in order for this relationship to work at all. And that has to start somewhere, in a situation where you'd be strongly tempted to do something because you can.
Right.
That's a good point to say, like, this is the decision point for my life where I'm not going to fall for that.
Yeah, sure.
Which then like brings to my mind the scene in the, so we touched briefly on the town, on the train rather. That didn't go my way. Like, I got caught
Me
running
too.
through the woods.
Me too.
Okay, maybe that again just no, actually, I think it doesn't just happen because you can see in the decision trees
Yes.
no, not in fact, I think most people didn't, if I remember
Right.
correctly.
Got
But
arrested in the woods. You and 23 other percent. I'm like, what? Was there an option not to? Because I was hitting right bumper and left trigger all as hard as I could, and I couldn't get out of that situation.
I was very disoriented in the woods, which I
Yes.
think is actually like intended.
Yeah.
We talked about some of the rigid camera controls and the obtuse like QTEs, but I feel like feeling disoriented in those woods is probably by design
Right.
that it's you're panicked and you're fleeing and like which way do I go, and the sound seems to be coming from everywhere, and that was very effective. And I got to a point where I was like climbing up a sort of a wet cliff and
Yes.
doing relatively well, and then when the people come below her, Jody just like presses herself back against the cliff face. I'm like,
And puts her
yo,
arms
no,
up.
they're
Right.
gonna see you, and then they immediately see her. And this eventually leads into, it sounds like we got something very similar,
Yes.
into like escaping on a motorcycle and like riding into a town. Did you get to
Yes.
this? Okay.
Yeah, that was the
Um,
most tense experience for me because having ridden on wet roads, I was freaking out the whole time. I was just waiting for her to dump any second. I hated that, but go ahead.
For me, I think one of the most tense moments came just a little bit after that when she's being hunted in that town and she's pleading with Aiden to like stop them. And I'm like, I did everything that I could that wasn't immediately directly violent, followed by as many options that I could find to be directly violent, and it
Yes.
still wasn't enough. And I feel like I got through there by the absolute skin of my teeth.
Angel, I was having the same experience. She's saying, please, please. And I'm like, I'm trying. Like, I don't know. These guys are all blue. I can't interact with them. I have no idea what else I'm supposed to be interacting with. And finally, after several minutes of this, she yells the helicopter. Did you
Yes.
have, yeah. And that felt like a gimme, you know, like, all right, clearly they're not understanding that the helicopter is a thing they need to do.
Yeah, which was very true. Like it sounds
Yeah.
like the both of us were
Yes.
like, I didn't want to choke people out. For all the reasons we've just discussed, I didn't want to like I didn't know that you could possess people and make them shoot each other.
Right.
That wasn't on my power menu prior to that scene. It's like,
Right.
oh, I guess that's what this is. But like you run out of options and they just keep coming.
Right.
And at that point I was more driven by Jody's sense of self-preservation than
Yep.
by any artificial limitations on what powers I was willing to use.
Yep, absolutely. And I thought it was, this is not, I'm going through the scene in my head, and the end of the scene is she's hovering over him saying, next time I'll kill all of them. Something to that effect. And her entire left side, the left side of her left thigh was just road rash. And I appreciated that because when she initially fell off the bike, I was thinking, oh my God, the road rash. And I suspected that they were just going to use video game logic and not have her walking around with, the entire left side of her body being hamburger. And they didn't. They showed, what the experience would be for someone wearing very tight jeans to fall off a bike and slide several feet on the pavement. And yeah. Ugh. So I think there were some really, and I was just about to do like wrap up thoughts about how I think some things were really neat and other things, I'm frustrated with. But just real quick, I'm very curious about the monsters. At the point where we're at, I'm very curious about the role that the monsters are going to be playing, what they are, why they're a part of the story, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have any thoughts about?
Only complete guesses in
Yeah.
terms of like the relationship between Jody and Aiden might be drawing the attention of other like cross-worldly entities,
Yeah.
other souls that are out there. I but that's there is this, gosh, which is the scene where I think it's Willem Dafoe asks her, who did this to you,
Yeah.
like the scratches, and she's
Yep.
like, was that Aiden? She's like, no, it was the monster.
Yep.
And Jody clearly draws a distinction between these two things. The monster, I don't think, is Aiden when it gets mad.
Right.
It seems to be another thing. And she says the monster. So it feels like it's something else that is familiar to her, but that she has not yet articulated. And
Oh yeah.
I think that's sort of like you said, in terms of wrap-up thoughts, the fact that this story is told non-linearly at this particular moment feels like a narrative decision that was made without a lot of understanding for why stories are sometimes told non-linearly. One of the benefits of telling a story out of sequence is that you get to show the effect before the cause. So as the audience is going through, they get to, like, something happens that they don't fully understand, and then they are treated to an earlier scene
Right.
with that character learning something or having an experience that then informs the thing that the audience has already seen. It's like, oh, that's why it's like that. And I haven't had a lot of that so far. If anything, it's been almost the opposite, where it's like events that occur later, like the party scene where they're like being CIA spies,
Right.
are informing my decisions earlier on, like whether or not to take revenge. I don't feel like I'm
That's so
learning more
interesting.
about Jody and Jody's predicament by having the story told out of sequence. I feel more that it's coming to affect the choices that I make, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense, and that's incredibly intriguing. And it's also making me wonder if it's intentional. But I'm certainly looking forward to like the next chunk
Yeah.
and watching
So,
it all. Yeah.
I guess what we'll be doing is probably playing through another segment together and maybe getting together like this again to talk it out, and then maybe doing, as we go, however many chapters there are, some sort of wrap up at the end.
Yeah. Sounds fantastic. I love this plan.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you very much for talking to me about the game, and we'll reconnect in a few days and talk about what we've done since then.
Absolutely. Thank you too, Angel.
Bye.
Bye.